Hey everyone, it's April 2nd, 2021. Welcome to episode 4 of my podcast, Is Breakfast Included? Today I'm going to be talking to Kevin McGuire, the lead singer and guitar player of the Gama Sennin out of Los Angeles, California. And these guys put out an album on vinyl in 2020, and today it's released digitally on all streaming platforms. Now, I met Kevin back in 2016 when he started writing, so I've kind of watched the progression of what turned into be a damn fine rock and roll album. He's going to talk about the recording and the different studios he recorded in, as well as the players. You'll be amazed as to who played on this album. He gets a little personal and tells me why he had to write this album and had to put it out. So let's get into it. Tell everyone who you are.
Hey man, I am Kevin McGuire. I am the singer and frontman, and I guess the kind of the leader of this California psychedelic rock collective, the Gama Sennin. And I am also a touring technician of like 15, 20 years in the live event industry. And that's how we know each other, because we work together on Duran Duran.
Yeah, man. Right on. Yeah, that's where we met. We'll get to this. I got some questions about the album, but I do remember on that tour, I remember you playing me like rough tracks of this album.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny, it's nice to be on this like end of it now and experience it. It really kind of is a nice, like, I don't know, bookend, because when we first met, I didn't even think I was going to make a record. And I was like in this relationship, and we did like, I forget what leg of the tour we were doing, but it was early in the Paper Gods tour. And I come home from tour on a break, and I was in this relationship, and I was engaged, and that blew up. And I started the next leg of tour with like, I'm making this like crazy record out in Joshua Tree with at the Rancho de la Luna with Dave Ketching, and who's, you guys had done a show with the Eagles of Death Metal in Paris right before the attacks, which was kind of weird that it was all kind of everybody was kind of almost there and was there. And yeah, I'd write the songs backstage or in my hotel rooms. It was the first time as a roadie I like carried a guitar around with me, and I just kind of, it was the beginning of a new adventure and a new chapter in my life that would be very positive in the long run. But, some of the songs were written like on long travel days. Like we went to San Antonio, and everyone was saying it's the altitude, because we had driven over the Rockies and everyone felt off. And, I wrote a song called It's the Altitude because of that, and it was kind of the Duran Duran era of this record for me was very special. And it's, it's funny looking back on everything, where it all comes from.
Yeah. Well, once you got into recording, you said you recorded at Rancho de Luna.
Yeah. So when I was working, when we started that tour in when we started that Duran Duran tour, we were in, I think, Nashville or something one night. Now I went out to a show. It was like 4th of July, and I went out to a show. My friend Keith Morris was playing. His band Flag was doing a show at the Exit Inn, and I had this like, I was hanging out with him after the show, and he was like, Kevin, you're making this big record. You're going to the Rancho de la Luna, and who's going to produce your record? And I hadn't really thought about it too much at that point. I thought I was just going to go out there and start recording. I had booked 11 days with Dave, and I, was just writing a bunch of songs. I think even at one point on that Duran Duran tour, I can't remember before this or not, is that I went to Costa Rica for a bunch of days and just wrote a bunch of music. And Keith Morris was like, you need to find a producer that isn't just like the desert rock guys, And so I called my friend Peter Franco, who's another sound engineer and touring road guy. He had worked with Daft Punk in the studio and on all their live shows, and he was out with Tycho at the time, and we had worked together on the Grammys and a few other big events like that. And he decided to kind of hop on board, and it'd be his first record after the Daft Punk record. So we went out to Joshua Tree, and we recorded there for 11 days. And it was great. It really kind of solidified the sound that the band was going to have. The Rancho de la Luna is a really great place to experiment, because being out in the desert is really freeing. And, it's got a history of people going out there to escape and kind of find themselves. And we, as a record and how the record sounded, we really, really got everything we needed out of there. And then we took it to a couple of different other studios to finish it. One of which was John Avila from Oingo Boingo's house, Brando's Paradise. And then we went and did a bulk of the recording at the studio in Stinson Beach, California, called Panoramic House, where My Morning Jacket and Feist have recorded, and Band of Horses, I think, and the guys from Grandaddy. And that place is just as magical as the desert. And it really was, we had all these really unique recording places, and I think you really hear it in the record, just like kind of the experience we had really translated to the music.
Yeah, it's got a really cool feel from track to track. I've been listening to it a lot. Yeah, you mentioned John Avila. He played on the album, correct?
Yeah, John Avila, he is like the full-time member of the band, because it is a collective. I do kind of like to write songs and round up my friends that I've amassed over the years. So John, actually, we went out to the Rancho, we recorded, we did a lot of scratch. It was me, my guitar player, and then an old friend of mine that's a tech, and he played bass, and we just didn't really get what we wanted out of the session for bass. So we finished that session up with really great Adam Maples from the Earthlings and Sea Hags. He's an old friend. He played drums on the record. We got the drums down really great. We got a lot of guitar ideas out of it and a lot of the scratch guitar parts. But what we didn't get was bass. So I called my friend Joby Ford from the Bronx, and he had been working with John Avila, Avila, man, excuse me. He had been working with them on the Mariachi El Bronx records. So I didn't really know who John was. Of course I'd heard Oingo Boingo, and, but for me, it was my friend Joby that was like, this is the best bass player that I know, possibly one of the best musicians that I know. And I just took his word for it, and I called him, and I sent John some old tracks, and he said he loved it. And we did the session, and then I told him, I want you to be able to, when we take these songs live at some point, I would really love for you to be a part of that. And, the guy is 64 years old. He and I go on 25-mile bike rides on a regular basis, and he's got more energy than anyone I've ever met. And he's just always making music, and he's a huge part of this record. And I'm just so blessed. He's got the best stories about when Oingo Boingo was recording at Dead Man's Party. Prince was making Purple Rain in the Studio A, and they were in Studio B, so they'd all take breaks together and play basketball. And John it's amazing. The guy is such a talent, and he is the other member of the band that's a permanent fixture.
Yeah, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Dimitri Coates played on it as well.
Yeah, so Dimitri and I, we're old friends from his band, the Burning Brides. When they moved to Los Angeles, we were kind of in the same scene. And I helped him out with some video stuff for some of his records. And I had an older band called Alarma that had opened up for them a couple times. And, we were old friends. And honestly, it was supposed to be Joby Ford from the Bronx that was going to play on the record. But Joby had some serious back problems going on. And anytime I called Joby, it was he was in too much pain to talk or whatever it was. And because of my touring schedule and how hard it was to get everybody to come together to record in the little pockets of time that we had, and the travel, because at this point we were traveling to Stinson Beach from LA, and people were flying in, and that gets expensive. And Joby, I talked to him. He realized that he had to have surgery at the last minute, and I just couldn't risk a session around someone's bad back. And I mean, if anyone's ever had back injuries, how painful it could be. So at the last minute, I called Dimitri, and Dimitri came up, and he said no problem. And I flew him into the studio, and he knocked out those songs in 2.5 days. And, at this point, the record was 2017, and Stinson Beach is north of San Francisco and Marin, right over on the other side of the Golden Gate Park or Golden Gate Bridge. And it's just gorgeous little community, perfect California getaway. But the high winds combined with the all the fires that happened in California was leading to certain counties at the time, especially in the Bay Area, were just rolling blackouts. So in the middle of our day one or dates like this beginning of day two or something like that, we get a call from the studio manager and saying that, hey, at any point the city may kill the power. And when that happens, like you guys are just off until they turn you back on. And that's, that's kind of daunting. So we were like sitting there, and at this point I've known Dimitri for like almost 15 years off and on, and he's always been real supportive. And he plays in a band with Keith Morris, and that's how I know we're all friends together and off. And Dimitri just looked at me and he was like, "Are you serious?" And I was just like, just hit save and record and hit save and record. And when you make a record, you have this like picturesque fantasy of how everything's supposed to go. But if you've ever like really tried to build something, it's really more of how you react to the curveballs than like the slow pitches of like, and it's taught me a lot about patience. And I thought I had a lot of it like in the live event world where, a video panel would go out, or like a string for a tech breaks in the middle of a song and they got to go fix something. And there's 20,000 people on this, like looking at you. But man, you really don't feel the pressure until, your very expensive recording session may lose power.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it gave the record an energy though, because we stopped like worrying about if we're going to make guitar tones different on every song. We're just like, we got a good guitar tone. That's what we're going with. And that ended up being like a really gelling factor for the record, because Dimitri came in after when Dimitri first heard the songs, and he even admitted he didn't really listen to them that much before he came to the session. There were no keys on the record. We brought Chris Caswell in, the piano player, before. So there was all this new music that Dimitri never heard before on top of the songs. And when we started bringing in the interludes, so it was just a totally free form, like, whatever's wrong could be right. Let's just see what we get. And, Dimitri looked at me and he's like, well, just keep that beet juice flowing and let's smoke a joint and let's get this done. And we just made pressed juices and smoked weed and recorded. And it was a lot of fun.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the It's the Altitude. What kind of inspired you to write that? There's a song on the album called Without.
Yeah.
That really just, from the first time I listened to it, that's the one that stuck out to me. And it's the one I constantly play, I'm going to wear that groove out on the vinyl. So,
well, there's plenty more, man. So if you wear that one out, you just go over to our Big Cartel store and, wear out another version.
Right on.
Well, it's kind of funny. Those two songs are, because the record is really set up, because it's a larger narrative, right? Like the record doesn't not every song just sounds like I Kill You. Not every song sounds like Without. And there's a reason, because it's kind of like a human wanting to destroy an old version of themselves in order to become a better person, right? And Without is an act one of this 3-act movement, I guess you could say, a very classic, like all, like the Wagner Rings or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to compare. That sounds so pretentious when you say that.
Yeah. You should have said that with your teeth closed.
Oh, I did. And I was just looking at myself in the mirror without a shirt on, like, yes, I'm like Wagner. But so act one is I Kill You and Lines Alone. And then if you flip the record over, it's side B, which is like a choice between A or B, and Without, that song is kind of a song about reflection and taking time without all the distractions to kind of figure out what it is that's inside of you, and what maybe, like in City Slickers, Jack Palance would say it's that one thing, or, what is your passion? What drives you? And I think it's really relevant now in 2021, because we all had to take a year off without all sorts of different things, whether it's the concert touring industry or people being sent home from work or people having to homeschool their children, or, even people that just, it didn't really affect them that much, but they can't go to restaurants anymore. So they're seeing the different layers of society that have been kind of ripped off and the masks coming out. And truth be told, that song almost didn't make the record. When we were writing it, it just never felt right. And the parts were reversed or something like that. And the bass player was playing more of a guitar line that was moving and stuff like that. And I was playing more of a slower line. And there was a rehearsal demo where you could literally hear me say, all right, let's try and flip the parts. And if it doesn't work this time, we're moving on. And we flipped the parts and it worked perfect. And, that song leads into It's the Altitude, because that's kind of supposed to be the side where you've made the right choice, or that's the choice that this narrative is going on, where you've accepted and realized what it is that you're what's been ringing in your head, trying to break free from all this stuff. And you're doing that. And in doing so, you're inviting the spirit to you. And It's the Altitude to kind of kill that old version of yourself and help you breathe through it. But that's kind of like, like the artist interpretation of it. But on a more personal level, on that Duran Duran tour, like I said, we were coming from, I think, Denver, and we had we had a show in San Antonio, and we were staying on the Riverwalk, and it was like a 19-hour bus ride. And if anybody's ever gone through the Rockies on a tour before, you mostly stay up all night drinking and having fun, and you see the sunrise come over the Rockies, and the altitude shift combined with that and your just exhaustion from tour kind of leaves everybody in this like really weird haze. And I've always been fascinated with San Antonio as like a ghost town, and kind of I don't really believe that ghosts are real, but I like the idea of them. Yeah. And it's a really eerie town because it looks like it should be filled with tourism, but it's not at night. It's very vacant and eerie. The Alamo and kind of the legend of that, and kind of the juxtaposition between the complicated relations between the Mexican and U.S. borders over the past 200 years, to say the least. And that's a totally different subject. But everybody was walking around on that tour. They're like, oh, it's the altitude. It's the altitude. So I started writing this like really slow, like droney goth song. And I think on one of the demos, I was playing a guitar solo late at night after probably having some margaritas at that bakery place, the Mexican Miateria. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's like one of my favorite spots there. And somebody banged on the door in the middle of a guitar solo and was like really mad at me for playing guitar that loud. So like if you listen to the demo of it, wherever that is, you could hear like clearly where the changes tones because it was done at two different times. But that song just reminds me of like, because I would walk to work or walk home from the venue and just kind of like absorb that ghost feeling of the Riverwalk when there's no one on it.
Yeah, because we were there for a couple of days. We were there for a few days.
Were we?
Yeah, we did 2 shows in San Antonio after.
Oh, well, then there you have it.
Yeah.
That's probably why I was set up so well. And then I guess you're right. Yeah, that was a fun tour, man.
Yeah, it was. As long as it went, it was fun. Well, another thing about the album, man, it goes all over the place, and I hear all kinds of influences. But was there anything you were listening to in particular that really affected like your songwriting, your tone, your whole idea of this album?
I mean, it's really like an accumulation of so many influences of my life. Obviously, it would be hard to argue that I don't like what's come out of Joshua Tree and the Rancho de la Luna in the past 20 years, and kind of that deserty psychedelic rock that exists from that part of the world. I always liked records that did something like Nine Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral, and The Fragile. That was like kind of like it felt like an entity, or I listened to a lot of Granddaddy when they came out with the record, The Software Slump, in the early 2000s. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's kind of hard to say what really I was listening to at the time, but, you know, I just always listened to all these great records. And when Peter Franco and I first got together, to like, when he's like, okay, I'll do the record with you, and these are the terms, and yada yada, we worked all that out. He came down from Berkeley, and we just had like a listening session. We didn't touch any instruments, we didn't talk about any songs, we just talked about like what records I wanted to sound like, and what records I wanted were a big part of my life. And that turned out to be like stuff like Brian Eno, No Pussyfooting, and Music for Airports, and Sonic Youth, and Granddaddy, and Shellac, and Nine Inch Nails, and all these desert rock bands. And you could really kind of hear a lot of it. And it you know, and then I was listening to a lot of Gang of Four for a while, because I kind of like that robotic rock of it. And while we started making the songwriting, it was really important. I had a mantra that like it had to be like dark, sexy, and driven, and I just felt like I needed some sort of construct, or like, you know, some rules. So I didn't just make it go anywhere, but I didn't want to have any rules at the same time. So, you know, if you could put this record on and smoke a joint with your lady or your like sexual preference of choice, and forget that a record's on, and like let go, and just kind of have a fun night. And if that requires some sort of chemicals or just a glass of wine and a joint, whatever, I wanted to make a record that worked for that. So when you put it on, it was an experience, not just like a bunch of choruses and like 2-minute and 30-second pop songs, you know?
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question, man. Premonitions. Like, I listened to the whole album and I'm like, Premonitions has this guitar solo on it. It's not fancy. There's not a lot of, you know, mind-blowing licks, but that solo just really just ties that song together. Did you play that solo, or was that
I wish I did play that solo. That was Dimitri Coates' swagger on that. And you know, it was, again, one of those things on that it was, you know, songs go on journeys, and that song in particular had a lot of like, we shortened it, we turned it around, it changed names like 4 times, and the premise of the lyrics changed, and that guitar solo really just kind of ties it together. It's kind of like it dances, and it has its swagger, and it's like the solo is almost on roller skates or something like that, you know? Like, it was, I wish I played that solo, but my hat is always off to Dimitri Coates. I mean, I'm just very fortunate to have such talented friends that were willing to answer my call, you know?
Yeah, I really dug it. Like, I'm not a big solo guy. I play guitar, but I'm not a big solo guy. So I hate when I hear a song and I think, that was built around a guitar solo, you know? And it just kind of jumped out at me as I was listening to it. And I had to play it again to make sure that I played the whole album, like, to make sure I just didn't miss all the guitar solos. And like, there are no guitar solos on this album. And then this one just kind of just jumps out at you. So yeah, man, kudos to that. That's a great song.
It's funny how you say there's like no guitar solos on the record, because it's like, it's such a compliment to like guitar parts, you know, because like, I think that song Lines Alone has a lot of like guitar parts on it, right? And but it's not a solo. It's not like, and here it comes the solo, you know, where like on Premonitions, there's definitely like here we go. Here's a solo now, but it fits, you know?
Yeah, it fits. And like I said, that's not a jab at no solos, but you said there are a lot of guitar parts, a lot of layers, and it just all works. You know, it all really works. Trigger Finger.
Yes.
I saw the title and I read the lyrics as I was listening to it the first time. Is it kind of what we think it's about?
That song is not it never has any literal connection with guns at all. When I wrote that song, that song was a song that came to be. It was like one of the last ideas we had in our rehearsals. We all got like super drunk at the Rancho one night, drinking tequila and that Rancho de la Luna mezcal, and maybe we ate some like fungus or something like that. and we
Possibly.
had this dance party night and just came up with this long jam that we made into this song. And at the time, I was going to therapy to kind of, figure out, life on the road's tough. And, we all have things that trigger us. And that trigger finger was never about a gun. It was about all the things that set us off. And to be perfectly honest, it was more, looking at it now, especially with the glasses of what's going on in our culture, it's more of a statement. If I had to choose between guns or this hashtag wokeism, social media justice that exists in an echo chamber where we're now seeing all these things that set us off, and we're waiting to pull the trigger on being offended and how my reaction is to the outside world. And it was, if any song was about gun control, it would probably be I Kill You. But even that grew and took a journey of different meetings over the course of my life and over the course of the record.
And
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. It does. Makes a lot of sense. And that I Kill You is the first single.
Yeah.
Off the album.
Totally. And then everything else is just going to come out, and I'm going to release music videos as I can. And, hopefully we'll play some shows soon. And, one thing will lead to another, and then I'll be hiring all my friends to do an arena tour with me. I mean, you gotta have goals. You gotta have a big dream. It's like the music industry and any type of creative arts. We all think as a kid, you see these rock stars, you got posters on your wall, and someone's going to hear your song, and they're going to give you a check and roll you into a studio like you're the next Tom Petty or something like that. And the truth of the matter is that the music industry is this big, giant void that everyone's just trying to fill and get to the top of. And it's like every day you're putting a marble in a jar, and hopefully one day you put enough marbles in that jar where the jar is big enough where people want to check it out.
Yeah.
It's like little victories, man, and it just doesn't come overnight. And, my hat's off to anybody that's ever made a record or tries to make a record. And, don't give up. It's the most difficult thing you may ever do. But doing it could be the best thing in your life. And if it's not making music, that's your thing. Go do that thing, and, do it. Don't end up on the streets or something, but make sure, follow your dream, but don't be crazy.
Yeah. I think you can end up on the streets not making an album these days.
Yeah, I mean, in Los Angeles, it's definitely not hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man, it's a great album, and I was talking about it to a friend of mine earlier, and I don't say this too often. I really don't say this too often, but I the more I listen to it, and what you just said about having that big dream, man, I think I'm listening to something special, and I like a lot of music. My friends have bands, and I'll talk about them, and I'll say, "Wow, this is a great band," but when I got this album and I listened to it, I just kind of gravitated towards it, maybe because I dig the genre of music it is, but it's also has that. I hope you don't mind me saying this. It has that commercial feel that could latch on to something, in my opinion. But who am I, right?
Hey, man, thank you.
It's a good album, man. It's a good album, and I feel fortunate to have heard it early, these riffs early, and then now to hear them as a complete collective is just really cool.
Thanks, Bernie. It's really cool for me to hear that because, I made this thing because I had to, I wasn't I made records when I was a kid before I really became a roadie, and the whole industry got really just broke my heart, to be perfect, for just the most basic terms, it was very difficult to be in a band. I personally was not in a good place in my life to make music or be successful because there's really something to say about your internal balance and how that frequency resonates out into the world. And when I was 26 years old, I was in no place to make that record. But then in 2016, after 10 years of living on the road and growing up, and then a sudden change, I was really focused on, like, if I had died, like I probably should have many times, having suffered with mental health issues and drug addiction and just stupid behavior, what would I have fucking missed, And, the events of November 13th, 2015 at the Bataclan and in Paris, like, kind of resonated with me in a really deep spiritual way, because, my friend Eden was on that stage that night, and Eden and I had toured together on Green Day. Obviously, my friend Dave Ketching was there, and, everybody people in that band I had relationships with. And, you guys had just done a show with Jesse and the guys on a French TV show. So even guys on the Duran Duran crew told me that we were supposed to be there that night, but we were all just so tired. So it kind of made me go, like, if I was a music fan on that floor that just went out on a Friday night, like, what would I do? So that record always became a kind of a I don't know, like a marching order for me.
Yeah.
That in respect to those music fans that had died, that I was going to make something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was going to make this record in 11 days. Like, oh my God, Iggy Pop and Josh went to the Rancho in 11 days. We're going to do it. My ego got involved, and I thought we were going to kick this thing out. And, luckily Peter Franco was driving the ship in a great way, and he had a really great vision for the record, and he listened to me when I said how I wanted it to go, and he really heard me. And, that energy that you say that, like, that you feel like you connect to it on in a special way, really means a lot to me, because the frequency that I put into this record was from a very, very spiritually balanced and sacred place for me. And the more people that hear this and go, whoa. And, like, I talk to people on Instagram all the time, because I found that there's vinyl collectors there. And that's what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with the vinyl collectors. You guys could have my music on Spotify or whatever it is. It's like Tinder for music these days. But the music that I made is because I wanted to hear my record on vinyl. And I made the most expensive version of it I possibly could. And I got distribution on my own because people resonated with it, and because of the chord that was struck inside of me, the people that played on the record grasped, like, they were on the passion. They felt my energy, and then they put it into the record, and it really shows. And commercial doesn't bother me at all. If it's good, it's going to be good. If that means that it's got to sell 100,000 records, fine. Like, I would love to be able to make this record pay for itself, and then do the same thing again, and continue to add to this storyline that I'm creating with it. So it's a nice thing to have, especially as the record's been getting out there in 2020 and 2021, that getting people that are responding the same way as you are, that I didn't just make a record that my friends pat me on the back and go, okay, that's great, now let's get back out to work. Like, I made something that apparently people like.
Yeah.
So
and people are buying it. And I saw somewhere, it might have been that the first single, I Kill You, had like over 8,000 streams already.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool.
It's got actually a little over 10 now.
Well, I mean, you don't have a label behind you pushing it. It's not it's. I think that's really cool, and that's a great opening track, man. That's a great opening track.
It's nice because passionate people are seeing that, and they want to help, and they want to be a part of it, and that's the greatest compliment of all. I mean. Yeah. I'd love to sell 100,000 records, but, someday some kid's going to come up to me and be like, dude, I was on 3 hits of acid, and I was listening to your song, and I had an epiphany, and that's going to be like, that's why I made the record. Thank you for my drop.
Well, I know when I started this podcast, like I'm completely new to this, and I put the first one out there, and literally you were the first person to message me and say I want to come on your podcast. It was very flattering to me because you were actually on a short list of people I wanted to ask, but just was too you don't want to bother your friends like, hey, come on my podcast or come on. It's kind of like you put out this album, and I've watched your journey with this album. I've watched it. I've heard about it. And I didn't want to be that guy that just bothers people, but for you to reach out, then it actually did something for me going, hey man, it's okay to ask people, hey, will you do this for me? Come out and talk to me for a bit. So I appreciate that. Like I'm not bullshitting you, man. You were the first person to message me and say, can I come on your podcast? And I was stoked. So, because I wanted to talk to you about it.
Well, I know how hard it is to put yourself out there and to create something, right? And like, I also know that somebody taught me a long time ago that if you have a project that you're passionate about, it could be a movie or a record. And for me, it was a music, but you need to do 3 things every single day to try and progress that idea outside of just writing and practicing music, right? So if you do 3 things a day and that ends up being 90 things a month that you're doing. So let's say you do 75 things because, 3 things a day is tough. Life happens, your tires blow or whatever, or your car. So if 10% of those things are a yes, I mean, adding 8 more things to your life to deal with, even if they're positive, is a lot of work. So, you just kind of get used to putting it in the shuffle. And the more you do this, the easier it is. Like I've done a couple podcasts, and the second I heard that you were doing a podcast, it was like, oh yeah, we're all in this life raft together of the music industry, whether we were working or we're not right now. So, why don't we elevate each other? Like, you've got cool stories, and just that little bit of magic push from some direction could be great. We just got to work at it.
Yeah, that's true.
See, and here we are,
Yeah.
And you got an image that looks, I love that little drawing that you have, and you're on, what is this, the 3rd or 4th one or 5th one or something like that?
You will probably be the 4th or 5th.
Awesome. I've done a few of these. Like I said, my buddy Gabriel Curry, and that at Echo Park Guitars, and that's a great guitar company that you should check out. I'm sure you've heard of their stuff, but I don't know how much you've seen of it. But I have one of their amps, the Vibromatic 25, I think it's with the head and the 212, and he's made I had to make a 115 cabinet from a JBL 130 with a tone ring because I have a 65 Showman head. And then I have one of his pedals, and then he made me, I ordered a custom guitar from him that he made this, it's like a Univox High Flyer kind of, and it's all on the Gama Sennin's Instagram page if you search through there. Yeah, so Gabriel Curry, I mean, I'd love to elevate him for a second because he's been such a good friend. Gabriel Curry started working for Leo Fender at G&L Guitars right before Leo Fender died. So, and then he went on to work for, I forget his name right now, but he was one of the main guys at Ibanez. So he's been making Echo Park guitars. He used to be in Echo Park, California, and he makes guitars for the guys from the Queens and the Raconteurs and Joe Perry, and they're super nice. They're made from the finest woods, and he's really, really passionate. And all of his stuff is made it's really nice. You get what you pay for. You should check him out if you ever get a chance to play some of his guitars, or if you're in Detroit where he makes them now and want to stop by, let me know and I'll hook you up with Gabriel Curry.
Yeah, definitely will, man. If I'm ever out there, I always loved going places like that when I'm on the road.
Yeah, right. Back in the day, I had called him because I was looking for an amplifier because I had bought this. I'd seen his guitars. I'd played his amps at Joshua Tree at the Rancho because Dave has one of his amps, and Dave's had this Flying V from him for years. So at the time, I was looking for a new amp because I'm a total gear junkie. And there was this video from the Post Pop Depression tour with Iggy Pop, and the guys in the band, like Troy and Josh and everybody, all played these Echo Park amps. And at one point, Iggy Pop takes like his straight mic stand with his big heavy bass, and he like a crazy Apache Indian or something like that. And I'm not, hating on anyone. I'm just using a reference of like a tomahawk throw. So he throws this mic stand, and the mic stand goes end over end, and it hits the head of the head off the cabinet, right, clear off it. And he slows it down, and you see Iggy Pop like pointing to it and pointing to the tech and pointing to the amp. But you never hear the music do anything weird. Like normally if something like that happens, you hear a pop, it's not like that band has tracks or they're burying anything in the mix. That's like as rock and roll as you're going to get. Right.
Yeah.
And the two techs come out from both sides of the stage, and they look, they pick the amp off the ground and they put it back on, and they look at it and they kind of shrug to each other. Like it looks fine to me. And they go back their separate ways. That amp took a mic stand from 20 feet away from Iggy Pop, got knocked straight off its cabinet, and didn't even make a weird noise, and continued to work fine for the rest of the tour. It had a small dent in the pine box because Gabriel was making the boxes out of pure wood. Like it wasn't a press or a laminate. It was like this hard ass tone wood. So I was on tour with John Legend, and I needed an amp. So I went to his shop in Detroit, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't really make amps anymore, but here's the last one of these amps that I'm making." And I'm like, "I'll take it." And because of that Iggy Pop story, I mean, I've had amps that I've done that too. I knocked a Soldano off an amp one time, and that amp was never the same again.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah. So, well, man, that's about all I have for you. I have a couple of more questions. One that I've only been asking the more recent guest.
Okay.
That if breakfast was included, Kevin, what would you have?
Oh, man. I guess it would depend on what part of the country I was in. If I was in a European country in England, I would probably have a full English breakfast without the blood pudding, and some fried toast and some tea. But if I was in California, I would probably want to have like a yogurt and granola and fruit and stuff like that, because I'd probably be a little bit more healthy that day. But if it was Sunday, I'd want to have like eggs Benedict and mimosas with a strong coffee. So, I'm a creature that likes to kind of when in Rome it.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, an English breakfast is I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
you can drink beer with an English breakfast.
I'm not a fan of the blood pudding either.
No, it's just such a weird thing.
It is,
it's like,
yeah.
It's like something they cut out of your body or something like that. Not like, oh God, you've got a black mass in you. We've got to get this blood pudding out.
Yeah. Someone just ordered it. Where can people find you online, like your social media handles and so forth?
The Gama Sennin. Just search us online. We're at the Gama Sennin on Instagram, on Twitter. I pretty much hang out on Instagram. I like that platform. I think it's really nice to connect. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/thegamasennin. The Gama Sennin is our website, thegamasennin.com. So that's TheGamasennin. And we are on all streaming platforms. So, go take the car for a test drive, and then you could head on over to our website or our Big Cartel store and buy a copy of the record directly from me. Or, and I'm a big supporter of this, go to your local record store and support them and ask them to pick up a couple copies from Cobra Side. We have international distribution, so any record store could go to Cobra Side distributor and order our vinyl, and you could support us and you could support your local indie record store, which is really important to me because Record stores are the backbone of our culture, and it's where people get introduced to music. It's where people fall in love with music for the first time. And how cool is it to try and keep places like that movie Empire Records open, And there's a lot of really cool mom and pop stores out there, including like Gravity Records in Wilmington, Wilmington, North Carolina, and Counterpoint Records here in Los Angeles. And they need our help getting through this time, just like roadies need our help and venues need our help and tour bus drivers and truck drivers and guitar techs and lighting techs. And they're hurting too. So, if you want to spend some money with me, do that. If you want to help your local record store, do that too.
Right on, man. Well, thank you for your time, Kevin. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, dude. Of course, brother.
And you said the album will be released digitally next week?
Yeah, April 2nd, Good Friday.
Well, thank you for being here, brother. Thank you for taking the time out to do this. And let's keep in touch.
Yeah, brother, give me a call. Let's hang out and come out to LA next time hopefully we'll have some tour preps or something soon. And we could all get back to work. And I live right under the airport, so I'll pick you up. We could have a beer or, an English breakfast or something.
Yeah, cool.
Take later, brother.
All right, bye.
No worries, brother. Bye.
All right. That was Kevin McGuire of the Gama Sennin. That was a fun conversation. So yeah, just do what he asked. Go to his website and order the vinyl directly from him, or request it at your local independent record store, and you could support both of them. These big box stores don't need your money. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.